Hey, how you doing? On my second channel, Jenny from the Block Reads, I recommended the Smithy duology, consisting of two historical gothic horror fiction books. They take place in the 1970s and concern the titular character, Smithy, a chimpanzee at the center of an experiment designed to test his intellect and whether or not chimps can be taught to communicate with humans. It's a good pair of books. I recommend them if you like a slow burn epistolary horror, which is basically the literary equivalent of found footage horror. I came across the first book at my local library maybe a week or two before I saw the trailer for Primate. It was a total by chance thing. I think the first one was published in 2018. Pure coincidence. Hell of a coincidence. Naturally, the subject of chimpanzees being raised as pets by non-animal experts got me back into looking into the Travis the Chimp story, which I suspect Smithy, Primate, and the chimpanzee from Nope were probably low-key based on. Or high-key, you know. So I saw Primate yesterday. And I have thoughts. Okay, so basic premise is that Lucy, a college student, is coming home to Hawaii with her friend Kate and not really a friend Hannah, who, by the way, is played by the girl who played Vanessa in the live-action Little Mermaid, and also Luce from, the Fallen TV show that they did, I think, was it 2020 that they did that in? 2024? I don't know. I can't remember. I haven't watched it all the way through. I just saw this girl's face and thought to myself, I have seen her before somewhere recently, and I don't remember where. But yeah, that's who she is. Anyway, they head to Lucy's house where her sister and deaf father live with a chimpanzee named Ben. Ben was, no joke, originally kept by Lucy's late mother, who was trying to study language and communication in chimpanzees. Some of it involves communication through an iPad, and I'm pretty sure there was some implication that he was taught ASL, which has been done before with primates, but I don't know, that part isn't really explored. Effectively, the dad has business to attend to and leaves the kids alone for the night, while Ben has unknowingly been infected with rabies after being bit by a mongoose. Interesting fact, Hawaii is the only U.S. state that does not currently have the rabies virus present in the animal population. They are very strict about animals being brought in from other places as a result of this. This is addressed in the film, but it's not really explored in any detail. I'm gonna get into it. So, predictably, Ben begins to feel the effects of the rabies virus and becomes aggressive. Basic plot, very straightforward. Very straightforward as it happens. Okay, I mentioned a few separate things in my little recap here. The mom of the family is dead. She raised Ben with her kids. We see a picture of a young Lucy with him. We don't know how Ben got rabies in a state that literally does not have rabies. And Ben might know ASL. Let me emphasize on that last one that could be my memory is failing me here. I do not recall Ben using ASL in the movie, despite the father of the family being deaf and his main method of communication with his daughters being through ASL. Although there is a scene where the dad is kind of putting him back into his enclosure and he is signing towards him, I think. So I think the implication is that Ben understands ASL, but I don't think I don't know that they showed him speaking it. I don't remember. This movie is very fast. I think it's by the end of the first half hour or so that things really kick off and Ben becomes an immediate visible threat to Lucy and her friends. The movie is 100% focused on the horror after that point. We're not yapping. We're not hashing out personal beefs. We are entirely dedicated to the immediate narrative of surviving Ben. Now, if you're looking for a fast-paced horror experience, you may enjoy that. The movie is definitely suspenseful and mostly concerned with horror and tension. If you're into slasher films where characters get picked off one by one in a variety of gruesome ways, you'll probably enjoy this one. There's quite a spread of gory, violent deaths in this movie, including one that you might recognize if you got Jessica killed in a very specific way in Until Dawn. If you know, you know. In that respect, the horror was done beautifully. I also felt that this movie very much understood what it was. It's a Monke slasher movie. The concept is a little ridiculous, and while the movie is scary, it also sometimes, it does also sometimes lean on the fact that the situation itself is a little weird and maybe a teensy bit absurd. I think it may have been in the first trailer, but there's a part where the character comes into the house and observes a picture of Ben saying, "Who the fuck keeps a monkey as a pet?" And then, cue the chimpanzee hooting noises. There were a few moments like that where the movie verged a little into absurd black comedy, but I enjoyed it. I like horror movies that I feel can strike a decent balance between taking themselves seriously enough to be scary, but not so seriously that it starts to inadvertently make a joke of itself. With that being said, Your mileage may vary on whether or not you find this annoying or a relief. But this is not a horror movie that spends much time doing the whole let's dive into the main character's personal life and dramas that may or may not have anything to do with what's about to happen in this horror movie. Developing characters is generally a good thing. Giving us an idea of who the main character is, what motivates them, that's all great. Increases our attachment to them and their story and survival. However, some horror movies, in my opinion, kind of feel, I don't know, kind of obligated to do it, I think. And it really comes across as, like, ham-fisted and insincere. See the Until Dawn movie, if you want to know what I mean by that. It's a lot of very forced sentiment that's not being pulled off well enough to justify its existence. It's there for the sake of being there. You know, especially when the entire movie is so focused on, evading the killer, and the killer really doesn't have anything to do with the character's history or personal life. It's kind of like, do we need to know all this information? Like, if we're just doing a straightforward slasher film, do we need to have your entire sad biography before we launch into the movie? I don't know. Your mileage may vary on that. Now, here's the thing about Primate specifically. I feel like this movie could have made good use of a bit of that sentiment. The dead mom thing is glossed over, basically, even though she's literally the reason why Ben lives with them. I feel like tying her and the dad being deaf and speaking ASL with Ben would have done more to give the story a little more emotional weight. Like, Ben is clearly meant to be a beloved family pet. It should be killing Lucy, who was raised alongside him, to have to attack him to protect her sister and her friends. Deepening that background and relationship, I feel, would only have added to the sadness and horror of a beloved pet suddenly becoming a real danger to the family. The choice to go full tunnel vision on the horror was also an interesting choice because, honestly, I was kind of expecting it to go a bit into the issues with exotic animal ownership. Nope, did it. Smithy did it. I think the people who did Tiger King did a whole series called Chimp Crazy, talking about the controversies of owning chimpanzees as pets, which, if I recall correctly, includes the Travis the Chimp story. It was a really strange choice, I think, to have Ben end up going aggressive as the result of rabies, because although I've referenced Travis the Chimp twice in this review, there are many stories of chimps going and attacking people without strictly being provoked. The whole controversy surrounding private chimp ownership specifically is that because they share some similarities with humans and can be taught to communicate on some level, is that their owners often forget that they are dealing with a wild animal. A wild animal, by the way, that gets way much more aggressive as they get older. I need you to understand that Travis the Chimp, in a fit of rage, ripped off Charlotte Nash's face and fingers. He didn't have rabies. He wasn't sick. He was agitated that day, and he decided that he wanted to attack. The thing about, he's a wild animal. He doesn't need a lot of what humans would consider to be provocation. That's one of the things you have to remember, is that what seems like innocuous behavior to us can seem like provocation to a wild animal. So, I'm kind of confused as to why they went with the rabies thing, especially in Hawaii, which does not have rabies. It's kind of a notorious fact about Hawaii when it comes to animals. I guess the only thing I can think of is that they needed Ben to have a reason to attack multiple people across a span of several hours, including a few he knows and is emotionally attached to. Yeah, I guess the more I think about it, the more it kind of makes sense to me. I can kind of see them saying, well, if we want this to be a horror movie, he has to be so aggressive that the characters struggle to get to a phone or escape. So we have to have a reason why he would keep targeting them for attack even after he's theoretically had a chance to calm down. Okay, yeah, I do think the internal logic for that choice kind of makes a degree of sense now. But I still feel like, given Hawaii's reputation for being rabies-free, that there should have been a little more of an explanation put in for how a mongoose got the illness and managed to pass it on to a chimp. I feel like that's just a really random thing to have happen in Hawaii of all places. And then, especially since, private chimp ownership, is that still a thing that happens in the mainland US? I think it is. I'm almost certain it is, actually, given how recently that documentary came out, but I'm not sure. But yeah, they could have contrived a way to have that be a thing on the mainland US, and then you wouldn't have had to, had it be a situation where, oh yeah, it's the mainland, of course, there is rabies here. I also felt, that the ending was a little... Okay, so somewhat of a spoiler. I said that the dad went out for the night or weekend or whatever. But he comes home towards the end of the film and starts walking around the house looking for his kids. Now, remember, he's deaf, so obviously he can't hear anybody screaming. But, I'm not fucking with you. Literally, as he's walking around, Ben ends up attacking a character in the background, like balls to the wall, beat down, full of thumping and bumping. I know the dad can't hear, but figure maybe he might feel the sounds of a knockdown, drag-out fight going on a few rooms away. I don't know. Maybe this really just depends on what kind of house or living situation you have going on, but in my house that I live in, I can feel if something heavy's fallen in the room beneath mine or a few rooms over. I don't know. That's just a bit weird to me. I feel like he maybe should have at least felt that something in the house was vibrating and went, wait a minute, I definitely feel something happening that's not normal. Someone's here. What's happening? What else? On a positive note, I felt that Ben was really good in terms of visuals. They apparently did a mix of a guy in a suit and CGI, and it was a nice mixture of practical and special effects. I'm not going to say I'd never guess that it wasn't a real chimpanzee, but obviously, given the nature of the movie, having an actual chimp on set to play the role doesn't work. In fact, to my understanding, I actually want to say I don't think they use chimps in Hollywood anymore, like, period. So they would obviously have to go with either a guy in a suit or CGI. But it worked. It definitely worked. I thought that the guy was very good, and I thought the CGI was subtle enough that, it was believable enough as a chimpanzee. Trying to think if there's anything else, and I think that's about it. So in summary, if you're looking for a fast-paced horror movie that doesn't waste much time on peripheral things like character development or background, you might like this one. It's a slasher movie, except the slasher is a Monke. And as before, it does seem to be a movie that's self-aware about its premise and has a little fun here and there. It's a fun, gory popcorn horror movie. But if you like your horror movies with a little more meat, a little more character development, especially for the main character, or if you were hoping to get a story that dives into the pitfalls of exotic pet ownership and the dangers of anthropomorphizing wild animals, you're probably going to be disappointed with this one. It's really not that deep for Primate.